Good morning, Commission. Good morning, audience. Good morning. Right? Yeah. Good morning. Yes. Today I'll be presenting my research study, which is called "The Possible Effect of Having Games-Based Strategies to Increase Fourth Graders' Willingness to Communicate in Speaking Activities in an EFL Class." To begin with, I'll talk about a bit of the context. My internship this term took place in Colegio Santo Tomás in Moscow, which is a subsidized school. And this term I worked with the fourth grade, which was composed by 39 students at the beginning of the term, and then one student changed to another class. This process lasted for about 3 months and a couple of weeks. And it's an EFL class since here in Chile, English has a role as a foreign language. Firstly, at the beginning of the term, we had to identify several, we had to observe the internship and come up with a topic that we wanted to investigate, that we wanted to understand. But in my case, I wanted to test the effect of something. So at first, I noticed that fourth graders had a really good predisposition to participate in the English class. However, they were just speaking most of the times only Spanish. They were using just isolated words in English. The teacher was all the time using the target language, but most of the times when students giving answers, she would let them use the mother tongue. And these classes were based on a book. All the classes, students were working on the book. And if they did something differently, they will be asking why they weren't using the book. The justification of the study, we're going to begin with the theoretical background. That according to Harvard 2007, it says that young learners, such as the fourth graders, have limited attention span, but when they're not enjoying what they're doing, they lose all the attention. Regarding that, it was found that students were just like answering the questions and then being demotivated from continuing paying attention to what was going on during the class. Regarding the empirical background, according to Paloma 2013, children that are immersed in an EFL context need to learn the grammar, of course, in order to communicate, but the most important thing is that they are able to communicate. So that's why this study is focused on the predisposition students have to communicate in the English language. Regarding the social-political background, according to Ministerio de Educación 2011, students that belong to the primary context are highly willing to learn and to participate in activities that involve challenges. So they are so they pay attention when those activities or situations in which they are learning are challenging, for example. So in order to maintain the interest of students in the class, it is important to teachers to develop several techniques or several activities that that engage students in the class. The question that was set for the study is do game-based strategies affect willingness to communicate and speaking activities for fourth graders at a subsidized school in Inglés. To answer the question, several of a general objective was set, and the general objective is to determine the effect that games-based strategies have on willingness to communicate activities for fourth graders at a subsidized school in Inglés. To answer the question and to achieve the general objective, there are four specific objectives that were set. The first one is to identify the initial level of willingness to communicate students have in the target language. The second one is to identify how game-based strategies can be applied as a fundamental part of an intervention. The third one is to identify the final level of willingness to communicate in the target language after an intervention. And the final one is to identify the statistical significance of the differences between the learners' initial and final levels of willingness to communicate in the target language. Since this study follows a positivist paradigm, the research hypothesis was set. So the research hypothesis is the expected outcome of this study is the effect of game-based strategies on fourth grade students' willingness to communicate in speaking activities. So it is expected that students' willingness to communicate in speaking activities will be increased after the implementation of game-based strategies. The null hypothesis is students' willingness in speaking activities would be the same after this intervention. And the final one is students' willingness to communicate in speaking activities will be decreased after the intervention. As I mentioned before, the paradigm that follows this study is a positivist one. Comte, as cited in Han, Weinstein, and Ford 2006, says that to find the truth of a phenomenon has to be studied in the way that is the science are studied. So this paradigm is based on empirical observations. So, as Comte said, this paradigm cannot follow something, cannot explain something that it hasn't been proved physically. For example, as the divine or abstract explanations for this paradigm is not part of it. The approach for this paradigm is a quantitative one, which, according to Fernandez and Nández and Batista, 2010, in order to achieve the purpose of this study, there are several stages has to be followed, such as the one that I mentioned previously, determine the initial level of students' willingness to communicate, then the intervention, and then to determine the students' final level of willingness to communicate. In order to prove whether the hypothesis is true or not. The methodological procedure is that since this paradigm is an experimental one, the procedure of this study will be following the several steps as I mentioned before in order to support or deny the hypothesis. The instrument that it was used to test students' willingness to communicate in both Previous involves non-game-based activities and game-based activities. It's a questionnaire that was adapted into a Likert scale in which students had to read several statements and comparing the two types of classes. And the scale was from 0 to 4, depending on the statement. The population are it was supposed to be 38 students of the 4th grade, and in order to in order to validate the instrument, according to UBA 1981, testing the credibility of their findings and interpretation with the various sources from which data were drawn. That is to say that regarding reliability, as mentioned by UBA, same year, a way to ensure the reliability of this instrument, it's important to consider the consistency of result, which means that having the implementation of this instrument in a context which has the same characteristics will be leading into having the similar or the same results. The objectivity, as stated also by UBA, has to do with the methodology the paradigm follows. The methods that are used in this study has to be public in order to ensure validity. Also, students didn't write their names on the piece of paper where they answered the Likert scale. The external validity says that this instrument can be applied in all contexts that share the same characteristics of the school. The data collection procedure is as I mentioned before, the Likert scale, where students had to answer regarding their predisposition in participating in both types of activities. The limitation is that the parents didn't sign all the informed letters. So I was working only with 10 students, not 38, which is a little sample of the class. The presentation of data, the first one, this one talks about the predisposition students have to communicate in the second, after game-based activities, and the second one is related to their predisposition to communicate in the target language where games were not present in the activity. Okay. The standard derivation was 4.9, the effect size was 3.2, and the coherence effect size was 2.5. Regarding the findings, it was observed that all students were more willing to communicate in the target language when using game-based activities. However, regarding the limitations, it is possible to say that the hypothesis was not completely fulfilled, since there were not a big amount of students participating in this time. Regarding the conclusions, it is important to say that that the findings of this study which are that students are more willing to communicate in the target language when using game-based strategies. It's really important because students, and regarding to this study, they are more aware of their willingness to communicate in most types of activities. For future studies, it is advisable to have more students participating in the study and spending more time on the process of the study. Regarding the metacognitive analysis, my teacher researcher's role identity during these 2 terms have changed a lot, because I now realize how important it is to be responsible, how important it is to be organized and to organize my time according to all the things that have to be done. Regarding the internship and seminar, the weaknesses and strengths and challenges for the future courses to come, my weaknesses in the seminar field are that I didn't spend much at the time as I needed to present a better report and a better study, and I was also I wasn't really organized with my time and with the things I had to do for the seminar part. However, in the strengths I found in this field is that I'm really good working under pressure. So even though I didn't spend the time that I was supposed to, I was committed when I expended the real time to work on the report. The challenges for the future are that I need to pay more attention to the things I have to do, be more organized, plan all the things I have to do, and try to cope up with everything I have to do in the seminar field. Regarding the internship, my weaknesses are that I don't have a plan B, so sometimes I have to improvise in the classroom. And my strength is that since I know a lot of my students, I consider them when planning all the activities, and that I'm really close to them, so students feel safer when participating in my class. The main challenge to come is to have a plan B for all the classes.